Dallas, Texas, Big D, the legendary city of urban cowboys, oil barons, tech giants, and of course, a hit 80s TV show. Known for sports dynasties, the state fair, megachurches, and a nationally praised restaurant scene. But more and more over the past few years, Dallas is becoming known for less glamorous issues: a surging violent crime rate, an out-of-control gang problem, a growing homeless population, political corruption, financial hardships, and a beleaguered police department. In fact, Dallas now makes several lists of the most dangerous cities in America. Travel sites offer safety advisories. Dallas has a murder crisis. We need help, screamed a Dallas Morning News headline in late 2020. In early 2021, the paper reported bleak statistics: 253 homicides in Dallas for 2020, a 23% increase in homicides compared to 2019. 2019 had seen the highest crime rate ever for the city, and despite the COVID-19 pandemic, all the shutdowns, and the shelter-in-place orders, 2020 broke those violent crime records. Our murder rate is higher than 90% of the country. The gang problem is growing too. There's been a 148% increase in drive-by shootings the last few years, along with rises in gang-related assaults, vehicle thefts, and drug crimes. So how did we get here? How did violent crime become such a problem in a city famous for affluence and excess? Turns out it's been coming on for years. It's been brought about through systemic undermining of police, permissive attitudes toward crime, and misguided priorities by our city and county leaders. During the summer of 2020, even as protests against police turned violent, Dallas City Council members called for defunding the police department. Council members Adam Basildua, Chad West, Omar Narvaez, Adam Medrano, Casey Thomas, Carolyn King Arnold, Jamie Resendez, Tanel Atkins, Paula Blackman, and Lee Kleinman all signed memos to City Manager T.C. Broadnax requesting that DPD be defunded. Some of the council members even participated in the anti-police demonstrations. 10 of the 14 council members called on Broadnax, who creates the city budget, to add options that would take public safety money and move it to other resources in order to, quote, restore trust, unquote. As anti-police protesters destroyed the downtown area, these council members wanted to gut an already impoverished police force. In September of 2020, City Council voted to defund Dallas Police overtime pay by $7 million, a 25% cut. All but 4 supported the move: Mayor Eric Johnson, who'd been very vocal against defunding police, and Council Member Kara Mendelson, who cited the climbing crime rates. District 10 Councilmember Adam McGue and District 13 Representative Jennifer Staubach Gates also opposed defunding. Criticisms of the pay cuts were widespread. One high-profile critic was Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who floated the idea of financial disincentives to any Texas city that reduces its police spending. During 2021, the governor has been hinting at other potential penalties for cities that defund their public safety budgets. Regardless, after approving a preliminary measure to gut police pay, several of the other council members gave press conferences to pat themselves on the back. But then a funny thing happened. Council members began to deny they were defunding police, despite their votes. Quote, "No one on the council wanted to defund police. It's simply not what we have proposed and not what we have done," Adam Basildua told Dallas's NBC affiliate. He's the council member who spearheaded the initiative to cut police pay. It's unclear how cutting $7 million from the police payroll isn't defunding the department, and anti-police activists celebrated his defunding actions, but Basildua certainly isn't the first politician to equivocate. It's also interesting to note that Basildua proudly touted an endorsement from the Dallas Police Association during his first run for council in 2019, then undermined law enforcement on his social media accounts and by joining the anti-police demonstrations. As of January 2021, he's running for re-election and has deleted some of those anti-police posts from social media, but it seems like Basildua is somehow trying to be pro-police and anti-police all at the same time. When the time came for a final vote on the city's budget, city leaders voted 9-6 to keep the $7 million pay cut, but add $8 million to the overall budget for policing, basically leaving Dallas's public safety funding intact. Even though social justice activists showed up in large numbers to loudly demand police defunding during the budget votes, council members heard overwhelmingly from constituents who wanted Dallas police to keep their funding, and the council voted accordingly. Since well before the anti-police protests held during the summer of 2020, Dallasites had been hearing news of DPD struggles. The media repeatedly reported on staffing shortages of between 800 and 1,000 officers. A high-profile murder at the swanky Hotel Zaza took an hour before it got a police response. 911 response times for Priority 1 calls, like murders and assaults, kept growing past 9 minutes. 9 minutes is a long time for someone whose life hangs in the balance. The City Council voted to spend about $500,000 on a staffing study from the firm of KPMG to tell us what everyone already knew, that the Dallas Police Department is woefully understaffed. Right around the time of that budget vote in late 2020, following a vocal defund campaign and criticisms for her handling of the Black Lives Matter protests, Dallas Police Chief Renee Hall tendered her resignation. Shortly after the new chief, Eddie Garcia, had been hired, 2021 had what the mayor called an inauspicious beginning. An unsigned memo intended for Dallas police and 911 operators indicated officers would no longer be dispatched for certain property and behavioral crimes. It's interesting to note that property crimes are a particular problem for the city. The property crime rate in Dallas is actually higher than in Chicago. At any rate, the memo was quickly rescinded after being released publicly and receiving widespread criticism. The council scrambled to learn where the memo came from and why neither city leaders nor the incoming police chief knew about it ahead of time. The memo was viewed as evidence of even more turmoil inside an already chaotic department. The city's Public Safety Committee discussed the memo at length, and during its January 11th meeting, and after hearing more details about what's called the Dallas Online Reporting System, or DOORS, they seemed to like the idea of deferring 911 callers to an online complaint form, rather than actually dispatching an officer for crimes like burglary of a vehicle or criminal mischief. They cheerfully spoke of preserving their public safety resources for more serious crimes. They reminded everyone that this was one of the recommendations of that KPMG study we'd spent $500,000 for. They seemed eager to follow in the footsteps of larger cities like Los Angeles and Seattle that already use reporting diversions. No one mentioned the slippery slope of starting to pick and choose which crimes are worthy of a police response. They gleefully spoke of reimagining law enforcement, and they're likely pleased at the notion that this DOORS policy could enable them to release friendlier crime statistics for the city of Dallas. Of course, it doesn't really matter which criminals are or aren't arrested if the district attorney won't prosecute. Dallas DA John Cruzo announced in 2019 that his office would no longer even prosecute what he called low-level crimes, like thefts under $750 and several types of drug possessions. By the way, when the district attorney was a judge, his nickname was Let Him Go Cruzo. Now, as DA, he's sending a clear message. Dallas police needn't bother arresting certain criminals. Business owners and taxpayers need to just deal with it by filing insurance claims when their property is stolen. And thieves and drug dealers in Dallas now get a free pass. And the city, again, likely gains some more attractive-looking crime statistics. And we embark on another slippery slope that comes from beginning to pick and choose which crimes are worthy of punishment. You've likely heard the story of the 7/7 police ambush. 12 officers were shot and 5 were killed during anti-police protests on July 7, 2016. That demonstration was organized by a Dallas group called Next Generation Action Network. They're activists that often operate in conjunction with Black Lives Matter. The July 7th attack was a tragic irony. Law enforcement agents killed while protecting the very people protesting them. Next Generation Action Network, also known as NGAN, refused to accept any responsibility for the police deaths. In fact, they seem to express empathy for shooter Micah Johnson, who was killed in the aftermath of his murderous anti-police rampage. God rest his soul, said one speaker at the first NGAN meeting following the deadly rally. You reap what you sow. NGAN is led by Dominique Alexander, a convicted felon who's been arrested several times outside of his violent protesting. Charges against him include domestic violence against a girlfriend and child abuse. He, too, seems unapologetic for the demonstration of his group that wound up serving as the means for the taking of police lives. He's blamed the government instead of the shooter or protest organizers. Alexander and NGAN are also heavily involved in policing in the city of Dallas. Their group, despite its anti-law enforcement stance, participates in a citizen oversight board where police are held accountable to people who are against their very existence. Officers are expected to explain themselves to people who've never had to face the kind of danger officers face every day. The police board was once a voluntary organization, but in 2019, the board received a $1.5 million budget to hire a police monitor. But after citizen outcry, they received only $375,000. In September 2020, City Council approved an increase to $500,000 of taxpayer funding each year for this committee. Citizen oversight was supposed to build a better relationship between police and the community. It hasn't been going well so far.
Go, calm down! Let's go!
Next Generation Action Network also participated in the past two searches for police chief. NGAN representatives were appointed by the city manager to the search committees. So, city leaders are, in effect, allowing criminals to help pick the leadership of the police department. If that seems strange to you, allowing criminals to have input on the selection of the top cops in Dallas, this notion of policing by consent, then you're not alone. NGAN and Alexander also lobbied heavily for the defunding of Dallas police. Alexander publicly lauded Councilmember Basil Dua for that initial $7 million cut in police pay. By the way, here's Alexander buddy-buddy with our DA, John Cruizo, and the outgoing police chief, Renee Hall. This cop hater, this criminal, is well entrenched in the upper echelons of Dallas leadership and has sway over Dallas's public safety. But the fact that anti-police activists are part of the hiring process for the chief of police may not be that surprising. Reducing crime, violent or otherwise, doesn't seem to be a big priority for Dallas City Manager T.C. Broadnax. He does the hiring for the city, and his job posting for chief of police didn't even mention the reduction or prevention of crime as a job function. Do a word search on crime in the job description, and you get 0 results. The job requirements are focused on community relations and diversity. The chief search ended in late 2020 with the hiring of Eddie Garcia from the San Jose, California Police Department. Media in San Jose have reported on Garcia's support for the Black Lives Matter movement. By the way, here's BLM chanting ACAB, which stands for All Cops Are Bastards. Garcia has also reported a desire for stricter gun control. Policies, incidentally, that have failed to prevent violent crime spikes in cities like Chicago, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. The city manager can afford to do this, focus on his own social justice agenda rather than protecting the public, because unlike most city leaders, he is not accountable to voters. He's hired, not elected, like the mayor or city council. When the taxpayers demanded that the defund police vote be walked back, it happened. The mayor and the city council members are all elected officials, so they heeded that public outcry to keep public safety funding. The city manager doesn't need to listen to such input from residents. Even though elected officials are beholden to taxpayers and the city manager is not, city council members earn far less, about $60,000 a year for their jobs. The mayor gets about $80,000. They all need to demonstrate that they do their jobs well, or their constituents will vote them out. The city manager worries much less about job security, yet earns significantly more money than his elected counterparts, $406,850 a year. The governor of Texas, by the way, gets a salary of $153,750 a year. When the pandemic hit in 2020, many City Hall staffers had to be furloughed. The mayor actually called on the city manager to defer some of his comparatively large salary, but it didn't happen. So City Manager Broadnax makes about 4 times what the other city leaders make, and 65% more than the governor, and has basically zero public accountability for his decisions. He benefits from Dallas's so-called strong manager or weak mayor form of government. The city manager runs the show, creates the budget, and does the hiring. The mayor is basically on par with the other council members. He just represents the city as a whole instead of a specific district. Although he also runs the council meetings and he makes the committee assignments. Dallas is currently the largest city in the U.S. to utilize this weak mayor form of government. Even Dallas media have wondered if it's time to change this, to follow suit with other large cities, let the people choose who is in charge of the city, and rewrite the city charter in favor of a strong mayor form of government. It might not solve every issue, but it would allow voters to keep a strong mayor who they believe does a good job, and remove a strong mayor who's seen as doing a poor job. Will Mayor Johnson keep his job if he runs for re-election? Probably not if the council has its way. In late 2020, council members complained publicly about the mayor and his tendency to rearrange committees without warning or explanation. The council also tried to strip him of his ability to speak for the city at the state legislature, which failed. Texas Monthly Magazine gave Eric Johnson its Bum Steer Award in late 2020, citing that he had managed to alienate almost everyone. But it should be noted, every sitting council member endorsed Johnson back when he made the mayoral runoff in 2019, and if the voters change their minds about him too, the way the council did, at least we have a chance to fire him. There's no such opportunity with our strong and very well-paid city manager. The most recent public infighting at City Hall is focused on the COVID-19 vaccine distribution. Even though the county has taken the lead on vaccinations, city leaders are trying to make sure vulnerable areas get service by deploying registration hubs in certain neighborhoods. The mayor so far has slapped them down, claiming these council members don't have the proper authority to take these steps. The mayor is also the emergency management director for the city, and he accuses the council members of flouting the system to get free publicity for themselves during this election cycle. And yes, at least 2 of the council members requesting these hubs are running for re-election. Administration and interpersonal problems with City Hall go back much further than the current administration, though. If you research the history of Dallas's crime problems, City Hall troubles, and staffing woes within law enforcement, your searches will inevitably lead back at least 10 years to the city's mismanagement of the first responder pension system. The pension's funding unraveled more than a decade ago after risky investments and approved unsustainable benefits.
We're talking about almost $1 million in payouts for some pension fund executives.
The city became unable to honor its commitments to first responders, and the pension fund's negligence left the city teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. The city was named in multiple lawsuits over the pension debacle. The state of Texas eventually had to bail Dallas out of its pension problem, and taxpayers all across the Lone Star State are footing the bill for Dallas's bungling of the fund. So, pension issues make DPD an unattractive place to work and have for several years. Nobody is eager to pay into a system that might not pay them back. But it's not just pension issues that have led to the fall-off in DPD's ranks. The fact is, officers have typically earned more money and had safer shifts in Dallas suburbs. Outlying cities like Plano and Allen are happy to hire Dallas-trained officers. Some cops who attend the Dallas Police Academy resign as soon as they graduate. There is no requirement that graduates complete any sort of tenure with DPD, even though it costs the city about $90,000 to train each officer. And suburban cops probably don't have to worry about disrespect like city cops saw during the summer of 2020. No one can blame cops for wanting to leave the city and take a safer job for better pay and more appreciation. It should be noted that in 2018, Dallas Councilmember Adam McHugh spearheaded a vote to give officers a $10,000 pay raise, and it passed. Officers now earn about $60,000 a year, which is closer to the suburban salaries, But the riskier shifts and insolent attitude towards law enforcement certainly loom larger here in the city. So DPD still struggles to bolster its ranks. Chief Hall in 2019 even asked that the Texas Department of Public Safety help patrol the city and try to curtail the surges in violent crime and support her understaffed department. Governor Abbott granted Hall's requests and sent in the state troopers. As instructed, they followed the crime data and focused their presence on the areas of Dallas that were statistically the most crime-ridden. But since those areas were in parts of Dallas with a strong minority demographic, Councilmember Adam Basildua and County Commissioner John Wiley Price held a joint press conference to accuse the troopers of racial profiling.
I am now asking that DPS move their troopers from South Dallas and get back to the drawing board with DPD.
Troopers, by the way, only issued warnings 92% of the time during their 12 weeks in the city, according to North Texas DPS Director Jeff Williams. That's a much higher percentage than usual for DPS. Utilizing their data-driven patrols, troopers managed to confiscate hundreds of illegally owned weapons, made scores of drunk driving arrests, and completed more than 500 drug seizures. But Basildua and Price couldn't see past skin color. They were clearly more concerned with race than results. What's not getting results is the city's response to its homeless problem. Dallas now has the largest homeless population in Texas, and during the pandemic, homeless camps are growing in size and visibility. Authorities worry that confronting the camps is unsafe, and they don't really have the manpower to keep on top of the problem anyway, so the camps just continue to grow. Just like city leaders kept the 2021 public safety budget intact, they maintained spending for Dallas's Office of Homeless Solutions, about $12 million taxpayer dollars a year. The problem is, every year that the OHS has existed has seen an increase in the city's homeless population. Ever hear of the Cobra effect? That's where trying to fix a problem only makes it worse. Allocating tens of millions of dollars to fight homelessness has somehow only seen the crisis grow. In 2015, before the OHS was formed, the city had a homeless population of just over 3,000. That's what prompted City Manager Broadnax to create the Office of Homeless Solutions in 2017. By 2019, the last year's statistics are available, after spending $12 million a year to combat the problem, that number has increased to 4,538. Would the city's homeless situation actually be better off if the Homeless Solutions Office were never created? Maybe not, but our city finances certainly would be. It gets worse. The city also spent $115 million on a bridge that no one can use. The Margaret McDermott Bridge was constructed unsafely, not tested properly, and made with wrong parts during its construction in 2016, according to its architect Santiago Calatrava. City leaders blame Calatrava for building the unusable bridge, but in 2019, they approved another $7 million to fix it. Hopefully, people can use the bridge by the end of 2021, but for now, it's a bleak symbol, a visual representation of wasteful government spending and throwing good money after bad. The city loses money because of its leaders' political agendas as well. Dallas's position as a sanctuary city adds greatly to its financial struggles. Cities that turn a blind eye to illegal immigration lose an average of $25 million a year in healthcare, education, insurance, and public safety costs. That doesn't include the financial penalties the state has threatened to levy against sanctuary cities. The state of Texas loses an estimated $12 billion a year because of illegal immigration. According to the state, most of those costs are absorbed by taxpayers. Despite enjoying the fastest job growth of any area in the country, the city is between $4 and $8 billion in debt, depending on who you believe. Dallas property taxes have risen 40% over the last 10 years, and the average rent has increased 35% over the last 10 years. But the city isn't the only body with a heavy hand in the pockets of Dallas taxpayers. Dallas County is a prime beneficiary of your taxes too. And since 2013, property taxes in Dallas County have increased more than 56%. Like Dallas city leaders, the Dallas County Commissioners are no strangers to controversy. County commissioners now earn just over $170,000 a year, after voting themselves a pay raise in 2017 and again in 2019. Remember, the governor of the state of Texas only makes about $153,000 a year. The pay bump was surprising to many of us in Dallas, since getting a pay raise is usually associated with doing a good job. The County Commissioner's Court oversees elections and is notorious for mismanaging them. In fact, last year, voting equipment problems cost taxpayers an extra $6 million because the county bought expensive polling equipment that doesn't integrate properly with its voting machines. After the county spent $30 million to enable countywide voting in each of 466 precincts, another $6 million was spent to replace polling equipment that didn't integrate properly with its voting machines. And allegations of voter fraud and voter mismanagement continue to plague county leaders. ES&S, the election software and systems company that manages voting software for Dallas County, has fallen short in its election security duties. Its devices have been shown to be hackable, and voters have wrongly been turned away from polls due to various glitches. ES&S has also been shown to replace votes, which looks especially bad because ES&S also has business dealings with Democrat organizations like Share Blue and Act Blue. So maybe the recent blue wave in North Texas is a bit suspect. ES&S also has seen Dallas polls plagued by flash memory card switches with phantom votes and shuffled computer logs. Even with all those issues, ES&S representatives were also caught padding their bill to the county. The county problems aren't just administrative and financial. The Commissioner's Court may be in even more chaos than City Hall in terms of infighting.
Answer the question why. Why would less people follow it?
With the onset of the pandemic, and since the county court is in charge of Dallas's Department of Health and Human Services, Judge Clay Jenkins took charge of the coronavirus response. He's regularly issued orders and made solo decisions in cases that really should have gone to vote. The 4 other commissioners have expressed a lot of frustration with Jenkins' self-aggrandizing power grabs and have voted multiple times to rein in his actions and restrict his authority. His fellow court members are tired of him overreaching, abusing his power, and playing politics during COVID-19. It was Judge Jenkins who put in place the mask orders and shelter-in-place requirements and the safety mandates that killed an estimated 3,200 small businesses in the Dallas area. Despite his own orders against public gatherings, Jenkins praised the Black Lives Matter and the NGAN group protests that decimated the downtown area during the pandemic. He announced that the county jail would not process demonstrators who were arrested, no matter how violent they were. And it didn't look great when, as voters across Dallas County struggled financially and emotionally during the lockdowns, Judge Jenkins posted pictures of himself preening by a new Tesla. Jenkins also brazenly engages in cronyism. In early 2021, Jenkins issued private invitations for COVID vaccines, even though supplies were scarce and the general public was told they needed to make appointments in order to receive the vaccine. But Jenkins told certain political allies and friends they could just show up without an appointment and skip the lines to receive their vaccines. Among those reported to have received these private invites, Miguel Solis and Texas Congresswoman Retta Bowers. Jenkins backed Solis in a failed bid for Dallas mayor, and court members have indicated Jenkins plans to run for governor and support Solis as the next county judge. Another example of Jenkins' rampant favoritism: when Dallas County received federal funds for COVID recovery, Judge Jenkins sought to appoint his political allies to the $80,000 board positions. Again, Solis got the preferential treatment, along with Jenkins' former campaign manager Philip High and Patricia Nava. These friends of Clay were given the lucrative positions ahead of a confirmation vote by the entire court. And when the court blocked those appointments, the Jenkins cronies still had the nerve to submit invoices for work they'd supposedly done for the committee ahead of any legitimate appointments. Jenkins' quest for money and power extends into his other career as well. He's also a personal injury attorney. When well-known Dallas lawyer Brian Loncar tragically died in 2016, Jenkins was the executor of the estate, and he took full advantage of that role. He undermined Loncar's wishes, betrayed the widow and surviving family, and launched a hostile takeover of Loncar's law firm. If you look at the Loncar firm's website now, you'll see Jenkins' bio prominently displayed, and you can see the credit he gives himself for his handling of the Dallas Ebola scare of 2014. Not all Dallasites would agree he managed the Ebola situation very well. There were complaints registered when the family that was exposed to Ebola and was supposed to be quarantined were allowed to roam free, wandering outside their assigned dwelling and exposing unsuspecting residents to the deadly disease. And the home where the at-risk group was told to isolate, apparently none of the neighbors were notified that an Ebola quarantine was taking place nearby. Several lawsuits have been filed as a result of Dallas's Ebola scare. And whether it's Ebola or coronavirus, the judge clearly revels in the attention, holding the majority of press conferences himself rather than allowing DCHHS or other health officials to provide the lion's share of updates. Other court members have complained that the head of Health and Human Services, Dr. Philip Huang, seems to report directly to Judge Jenkins when he is in fact supposed to work with the entire court. So, to sum it up, Judge Clay Jenkins boldly usurps law firms from grieving families, makes health crises about himself, misuses his power to the point of multiple censures from his fellow court members, he selectively enforces his own measures to suit his personal political agenda, shows blatant favoritism to political allies, and doubles down on mandates that haven't shown meaningful improvement during the pandemic. It's almost beautiful to watch the county commissioner slap Jenkins' hand again and again. During this time of deep political divide, Democrat and Republican commissioners on the court are uniting to repeatedly vote down and restrict Judge Clay Jenkins, rebuke his actions, denounce his cronyism, and counteract his governmental overreaches. County Commissioner Teresa Daniel has also raised eyebrows during her tenure, perhaps most notably for the TechShare debacle. TechShare is a software company the county retained to create new software to manage the county jail. The county paid TechShare more than $30 million for the software. Then after 10 years of delays, TechShare hadn't delivered on the project, and the county pulled the plug, essentially kissing off tens of millions of taxpayer dollars. And Commissioner Daniels, she happens to sit on the board of TechShare in a joint effort with other participating counties. But the most controversial county commissioner of all may be John Wiley Price. Known as Our Man Downtown, the District 3 Commissioner has held his seat for 35 years. In 2011, Price and several of his associates were charged with acts of public corruption by the FBI, tax evasion, fraud, money laundering, aiding and abetting, and conspiracy to violate multiple statutes. Basically, the FBI said he took about $1 million in bribes to steer certain contracts. The FBI raided Price's house and found hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash. Despite the liquid assets, Price attempted to bill the taxpayers for his defense, but a judge denied that request. And in 2017, a jury found Price not guilty on several of the charges, but were deadlocked on 4 of the other charges. The U.S. attorney chose not to continue with a retrial. Price also got into a public fistfight with political rival Dwayne Caraway at a local gospel radio station, and Price was accused of choking a Caraway campaign staffer during the melee. Caraway was, at the time, the mayor pro tem for the city of Dallas. Side note, in 2018, Caraway pleaded guilty to federal corruption charges relating to kickbacks from a school bus stop sign camera company. He resigned his city council position and was sentenced to 56 months in a federal prison. But back to John Wiley Price. Our man downtown also famously abstained from the vote to honor the 5 fallen officers who died during that 7/7 ambush. He was the only Dallas leader not to vote in favor of the memorial. He's been arrested for attempted murder and accused of rape by 4 different women. He was found not guilty of felony assault in 1991 following a defense of racism. The New York Times speculated that jurors feared racial violence, like Los Angeles was experiencing at that time, and reported that some jurors claimed they were threatened with death if they voted guilty. The Dallas Morning News has endorsed John Wiley Price's opponents when he runs for re-election, calling Price destructive and volatile, and pointing out that a cloud of suspicion has followed Price for much of his tenure representing the Southern Dallas District. All of these issues, city and county, what's been different over the last decade or so to degrade Dallas so quickly and so harshly? In 2021, and its preceding 10 years or so, the leadership, which, by the way, includes election oversight, has been demonstrably liberal. The Dallas leaders' focus on social and cultural issues like homelessness and healthcare for all, and the shift away from core responsibilities like infrastructure and public safety seems like a logical reason. After all, nearby suburbs including Plano, Southlake, Flower Mound, and Frisco are staunchly conservative voting areas. They may be close in geography, but they are far from Dallas in political ideology. Several Dallas suburbs like these make national lists of best cities and safest areas to live in due to their low crime rates, strong job market, solid infrastructure, and reasonable cost of living. Meanwhile, Dallas keeps getting named to the lists nobody wants to be on for dishonors like historic murder rates, violent crime levels, corruption arrests, and financial mismanagement. Even the legendary Dallas Cowboys left Dallas in 2016 to make their home in the conservative booming suburb of Frisco. Indeed, lots of national businesses like Toyota and Charles Schwab are moving to North Texas, not to Dallas proper, but relocating their headquarters in the friendlier Dallas suburbs. The intent here isn't to kick Dallas while it's down. These call-outs are made out of love and concern. Love of our city, concern for this struggling county, a desire to make it the glorious location it's capable of being. To make Big D call to mind words like dignified, dependable, desirable, maybe even delightful. But the status quo can't continue because right now, with the current climate, Big D more accurately stands for words like declining, deadly, dying, disaster, destitute, depleted, and even disgusting. Something must change. It's going to take leadership that focuses on core issues: infrastructure, public safety, fiscal responsibility. Individuals, churches, and private charities are generous in their work solving social and cultural issues like homelessness, drug epidemics, and healthcare challenges. You don't see many funding drives to hire police officers or fill potholes the way you do those other causes. Our leaders either need to get back to basics or we need to find new leaders, because no one, neither individuals nor businesses, wants to move to a city that's unsafe, unsightly, and crumbling. Dallas is in decline, and it's up to all of us to save it.